Hello, PICKASIDE Nation. I'm your host, James Finley, coming to you from the lab. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it was my pleasure to have an opportunity to have a conversation with Mr. Gary Schwartz, founder from the Lancers Allies Group. It was a very great conversation I had with him about different issues going on in today's climate. And I was so very happy that he made the decision to come on our show to do this show with us. So please sit back, enjoy our show. As always, if you are watching the show, do us a huge favor, hit the subscribe button, the like button, and the share button. Share this information with a good friend or your colleague because there was a lot to say in this candid conversation with Gary. Thank you so very much. Have a great day. Stay blessed. Take care. And another good day for the PICKASIDE Nation. How you doing? I'm your host, James Finley, for the PICKASIDE Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to have a very special guest on the show today. But before I introduce Gary to the show, we've been trying to put this together for the last few days, and I'm certainly appreciative that we're here at this moment. But over the last 48 hours, we have another situation that unfortunately has taken place. And that situation has to do with another life that was almost taken away. And fortunately enough, the young gentleman, Jacob, was able to survive 7 gunshots to the back. As I looked on the news just recently, they said that they found 8 shots, holes in him. So I think it would be very apropos for me at this time just to read off some names. Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Botham Jean, Atiana Jefferson, Aiyana Jones, who was 7 years old, 2010, shot in the head by the police, Tamir Rice, Sandra Bland, Eric Gardner, Philando Castile, Michael Brown, Alton Sterling, Terrence Crusher, Stephen Clark, Freddie Gray, Walter Scott, Ezell Ford. All of those lives, all Black lives that were taken away from us by the hands of cops. And in every single case, these were unarmed individuals, and the majority of them were shot in the back. There's one thing to get shot. There's another thing when you have to unload your gun, because there's a certain part where you have a lot of rage. I'm doing this interview today. I'm very upset. I'm very disheartened by what's going on because I feel like, when is it going to stop? And for whatever reason, it seems to keep going on and on and on. I have been blessed to meet a gentleman by the name of Gary Schwartz on Facebook. And after talking with him, I felt it would be necessary to bring him on the show. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to bring to the show Gary Schwartz. How are you doing today, Gary?
I'm doing okay, James. I'm doing okay. Thanks for having me.
And Gary, as you and I talked, over the last couple of days, and very candid conversations about today's climate, I want everyone to know that the only thing that separates Gary and myself is the color of our skin. Some of the beliefs, we have very strong beliefs in what's going on in today's climate. But I thought that it would be necessary for the audience to be able to hear Gary's side of things coming from a white male. And you don't always judge a book by its cover. Sometimes it seems like the cover of the book that they're all the same, but it's not. So, Gary, as I bring you into this, give us a little background about yourself and why we are here on this day.
Well, as you and I spoke, James, and thanks for having me again. And you're right. After speaking to you within the first 20 minutes, I knew there's really nothing that separates us other than about 2,400 miles.
Yeah, right.
And our beliefs seem very similar. And I'll just tell you, I'm sitting here in New York City. I am born and bred in Los Angeles, California, in the San Fernando Valley.
Right.
I went to Grant High School in Van Nuys, and you know, it's as angry as you are. I'm a little embarrassed. I think I reached out to you, and I definitely reached out to some of my friends, both white and black, last night because I was livid. And part of me was so angry, but part of me was embarrassed. It was like, I'm white. What am I so upset about? Like if I'm upset, could I imagine if I had black skin? And I'm just like, it's really taken a lot out of me the last 24 hours. It was very tough to sleep and everything. And I learned this morning, and perhaps I'm wrong, but I learned that Jacob Blake is currently paralyzed from the waist down. And so, yes, it's amazing that he's alive. After watching the video 100 times, I am confounded how he is. And thank God, or thank whomever, that he is. And I hope he does get better. But if that man is paralyzed from the waist down and he's got 3 young children,
yeah.
Yeah,
That's rough, Gary. Unfortunately, I saw the video, the uncut version, and for the life of me, I cannot understand why there are certain group, I'm gonna say group, of people that hate us so much. And I grew up learning that hate is probably it's a bad word. My sister, myself, we were not taught, brought up to hate people. We were brought up in a very loving home, where everyone is equal. My mother and my father are from the South. They faced a lot of the racial tensions during the era of the 50s and the 60s, especially my dad. My dad served in the Korean War, came back from that war, and he was stationed over in Germany. My dad dated white women, and he told me a story one time. There's a department store back in Atlanta, what was called Richie's at the time, and he was getting some cologne, and he said that in his billfold he had a couple of pictures of the girls he used to see back in Germany, and when he took his money out, those 2 pictures fell on the ground, and he said there was 2 white police officers that were walking towards him, and my dad was trying to cover up the pictures with his foot because he knew that if those officers had saw that, he knew it would have been pretty much lights out. So my dad lived in that era of where, everything was, we had to answer yes sir, no sir, and this and that. But Gary, it's difficult for me right now because when I was looking up all these names prior to the show, and I was looking up the background of it, and when I came across the little young girl's name, her background, and I'm saying to myself, my God, this has everything to do with being trained as a police officer, before you pull that gun out, you're trained to look at the surroundings around you before you shoot. And that young man that was shot down the other day had his children in the car. So whoever is the oldest kid out of those three or four who was in the car, they're going to remember that image for the remainder of their lives. So not only have you destroyed a young man, he will never be able to walk again, but we pray that that's not going to be the case, but also you have literally destroyed these kids' lives. So because of your anger and because of your rage, because the dude is not respecting you and he walked away from you, now you feel it necessary, because if you unloaded your guns 7 times, it was to kill somebody.
Absolutely.
It wasn't to hurt nobody. I mean, if you had a taser, you could have taken, there's a number of things that you could have done, and you had him by the shirt. And so, this is where we are. So we always start off with the first question is, what are your thoughts on today's racial tension?
So I have quite a few thoughts on that, but I would like to take one step back, if I may, and
Sure.
that is in terms of my background, so people understand. I'm first generation American on my father's side.
Right.
My father was 10 years old when he came to the country in 1939, and they escaped the Nazis. I'm Jewish, not religious, but I am Jewish culturally. I know a lot
Right.
about it. And I know what it's like to be a persecuted minority. I mean, there's anti-Semitism that's rampant, as always. However, and I admit this, in American, the dominant white culture, I can blend into. No one has to know I'm Jewish until I tell them.
Right.
So when I went away, in LA, I really didn't experience much anti-Semitism. It was only when I went away to the University of Colorado where all of a sudden you hear all these Jewish jokes that, like, wow, really? That said, just briefly, and we talked about it, there's a couple events that really formed who I am. And one of them, 2 months shy of my 6th birthday, I remember like it was yesterday watching Dr. King's funeral with my father. And I remember asking my father, again, an immigrant to this country, racism was not tolerated in my family. I mean, that was just strictly it. My father talked about how the people that killed Dr. King were fearful. And as a 5-year-old, you're trying to comprehend that. And so for me, I kind of thought of myself as a 5-year-old, so impressionable. And here I am watching a funeral of this incredible man. And now you take it to Jacob Blake's kids, one of which I believe was 5 years old. And the impression, sure, I was watching a funeral, but I wasn't exposed to the violence. I didn't watch Dr. King take a bullet, it just, my heart breaks, my heart breaks. And so the other one I want to share, because I know you're a Crenshaw alum, right?
That's correct.
So, and I'm a Lancer alum. And the reason I wanted to form Lancer Allies, which I have, is that my experience was from junior high school and high school was a multicultural background. There were a lot of kids that were bussed in from South LA, East LA. And because I played sports, track and football, I really had the opportunity to become friends, with these people. And I think what I mentioned to you, there was an event real quickly in the San Fernando Valley after homecoming, 1979, in which several of my friends from the city actually had cars that night. So they actually we were out doing stupid 17-year-old kid things. And at the end of the night, one of my friends, Greg Green, asked me, "Hey, Gary, how do you get to the freeway?" And so I said, come, I'll show you. So 2 carloads of friends of mine and my car with my ex-girlfriend. And I'll just say, she's white, I'm white, and all of my friends were black. Okay. Long story short, the 3rd car hit the 2nd car, rear-ended him accidentally. Unfortunately, the car wasn't drivable. We pulled over, no cell phones, 1979. I walked to a payphone, called the police, explained to them what's happening. Okay, we'll send officers out or whatever they say. I came back and told them. We waited. After about an hour, I said, guys, I got to get my girlfriend home, And one of Greg, who I've known since 7th grade, we were on the defense together. We've always been competitive in athletics. He said, is there any way you can wait until the police get here?
Mm-hmm.
And stupid me, initially I remember going, no, dude, you didn't hear me. Like, the police are on their way, everything's okay.
Right.
And there was an epiphany shortly thereafter, and it was like, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a white guy from the San Fernando Valley, and don't hate me, you city guys. But this guy is from the city, a black guy, and he has a completely different experience. The facts are the same. There was an accident, the police,
Right.
And I waited. I was the token white guy. I had to vouch for him.
Right.
Didn't have to, but that's really what I did. And that left such an impression on me. And after George Floyd's murder, and because of COVID and everyone's home, and I said, that's enough. I really felt that's it. I know what my life will be about from now on. And, in the last 9-10 weeks, I've reached out to a lot of my friends from Grant and other schools like North Hollywood and Taft and El Camino that had similar upbringings and or similar backgrounds. And I will say this, that I realized, when having read some statistics, that 40% of whites have 0 black friends. And a lot of people of color, less than the 40%, don't have white friends. And I said, you know what? You can still be a racist if you have black friends, but it's much, much, much harder.
Right.
And I decided, you know what? Let's just form a group that is going to bring people together on different levels, sharing recipes, being activists, whatever. So my long-winded answer to you. I guess you did ask me, though, what are my thoughts?
Yeah, on the racial tension that's going on right now.
Right. So, where I have the most difficulty is with white friends. A lot of them feel exactly like I do. Some of them, and I joked around for a while, I was like losing a white friend, one every other day. I mean, I ended friendships. It's as though there's such a gap in their knowledge. And I'm not saying that condescendingly. I happen to be a history major. I'm a voracious reader of history, including African American history, Southern African history. But it's as though they think the Emancipation Proclamation was given, 1868, then the 13th Amendment, 14th Amendment, and all that. And blacks should just, pull themselves up by their bootstraps. I'm like, okay, but what about, the 12-year Reconstruction and the fall of Reconstruction? They don't understand that. And I have to admit, and if this is coming from someone who knows history, I'm embarrassed to admit this.
Right.
I had no idea there was an African-American senator elected from the state of Mississippi in 1870. I don't know. Meaning, I don't know. Maybe all of my black friends know. I haven't talked to them about this. But when Reconstruction, and I'm sorry, I'm getting this, I always have to kind of come from a perspective of history. But when you look at Reconstruction and what the African Americans, the former slaves that were not educated, that were, they couldn't be taught to read and write. They did, quote unquote, pull themselves up on their bootstraps. And they did make so much of themselves. But when the Union pulled out and the black codes were put in, and the Jim Crow laws, it completely changed everything. And white people in general, I'm just saying, so many of them, and especially white males compared to the white females, they don't understand the real history of it and what's going on. And I hope I answered your question. And I know I always tend to go off on history because that's my perspective.
No, not at all. There's so many things that you said in your answer. So my next question would be, being that you are a white man, do you get backlash from? No, well, let me ask you this question. You're a supporter of Black Lives Matter, correct?
I am.
Okay. So here's the next question. So being that you are a white man, do you get backlash for being a supporter of Black Lives Matter?
I would say no more. I don't get any more flack, if you will, from being a supporter of Black Lives Matter as I do any of the other underlying racial tensions going on. Where I do get into issues is that some of my Jewish friends will push back because, as you know, in the media, there is some claims of anti-Semitism within the founders of Black Lives Matters. Now, it's, so you're never going to agree with anybody on every single issue. Right. But there's nothing that I've seen, and the people that I've talked to that are familiar with these three women who founded this, that give me any inclination that they're anti-Semites and whatever. So I have really tried with Lancer allies and in all my discussions to put anti-Semitism on the background, in the back, So,
when they were protesting after George Floyd's murder, and every day I couldn't get my eyes off of CNN and other media outlets, and when they would go over to the protesting in New York, one of the things that I was extremely impressed to see was that it was just as many or more white people marching and protesting, just like it was a lot of black folks. Now, both of us live in cities where there's not a huge racial divide. We live in cities to where, there is some racial harmony, unlike other cities.
Relatively,
opposed to, sometimes living down in the South or something of that nature. So let's go back to Minneapolis. When you saw the first news clip of George Floyd laying on the ground, knee to the neck, and when you first realized what had happened to him, how did you feel?
Wow, that's it's a really hard question. Part of me wants to say I was so angry. I think anger was the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was incredibly sad. Just to watch any human being die right in front of your eyes, albeit through a camera lens, through the television screen, is a disgusting thing to watch. But it's even more so when it's the people we pay to protect us That, and I had this, and I know you're asking me the questions, but I'd like to tell you quickly how I felt, and then I want to ask you what you thought, because what went through my mind is, okay, if I was there, would I use my white privilege? And when I say that, I mean, having played football, I thought of myself if I was a bystander. And everybody was screaming. You've seen videos like, stop, you're killing him, check his pulse, blah, blah, blah. I remember one black gentleman, younger guy, doing it. I can't recall whether they were black, white, whatever. But I remember thinking, if I was there and they didn't, would I have taken a run at the cop and knocked him over? It's easy to say I would, sitting in my comfortable, my apartment thousands of miles away. I really believe the type of person I am, I would have, because I know, and this is what's so sad in our society, those cops wouldn't dare kill me. Do you understand? And I figured, okay, I'll get that. And I say, well, I'd get the snot beaten out of me, right?
Right,
I'd be pretty messed up, but I wouldn't be killed. And that right there should be just, every white person should understand that.
Yeah.
And so I would ask you, did you think, if I may,
Sure.
did you think what you would have done?
When I first saw the news clip, the first thing I was like, what? Okay, because we're so numb to seeing police brutality, I was just like, man, we got his knee on the neck for, what's going on now? When I watched it the second time, and when I realized that man was dying on the ground, calling for his mother, who is no longer alive,
Right.
and and for someone to have enough power to be able to make a decision to treat you like an animal, it burned me up inside. And I've never ever, I saw the highlights of when Rodney King was beaten down like a wet dog back in 92. As I've spoken several times on here when I've interviewed other folks, I had to protect my church back in 92 during the riots. This time, for whatever reason, something went through me, Gary. If I had been there, and hindsight's always hindsight, more than likely, I may have gotten shot that day, because to see a man's life being taken from him and just to sit there and not do anything, that's on me. That man should not be dead today. But we had somebody, and I'm going to keep the language good on the show, but there's so many names that I could call this cop. But for him to take it upon himself, and the look on his face, that's another thing. As he had his knee on the side of his neck, and the look on his face as people are saying, he can't breathe. He can't breathe. And he's telling you can't. And the look on his face was like, okay, whatever. That just burned me up. And from there, I was like, I saw the protest. I was like, listen, I'm not in a physical condition to be walking miles and miles like I used to be able to do. But I wanted to make sure that my voice was going to be heard. I wanted to make sure that I was going to have a platform to be able to speak on these things. Now, I don't have a huge platform to like a LeBron James or nothing like that. But at some point, somebody is going to hear one of my podcasts. It might be this one. And my voice is going to be heard one way or another. Because what the police are doing now, it's sickening. It's embarrassing. And as I spoke with you yesterday on the conversation that I still have to have with my 30-year-old son, my son is 30, about what to do, how to act, what to say, body language, just to freaking stay alive. It's ridiculous. I don't fault you, Gary, because Gary, I know that there's a difference. There's a difference between when you get pulled over by the police and I get pulled over by the police. You don't have to go through the rigors of, okay, make sure my hands is on the steering wheel, make sure this, make sure that. There's not a threat for any police officer in America to shoot you. You're not considered a threat. And I'm not saying this to embarrass you. You know I'm not doing that.
No. You're absolutely right. I don't take. I'm not embarrassed.
Yes. But there is a threat that any time that I am pulled over, that my life is in the balance at that particular time. I have never gotten a ticket before, a moving violation ticket. Never. But I've been pulled over. It has to be way past 60, 70 times in my life.
Wow.
Where,
really?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, and out here in Los Angeles County, when I was coming up, Culver City was a hotbed for police with blacks. Redondo Beach Police, Hermosa Beach Police Department, all the South Bay areas were deemed, you need to watch your back. But the absolute worst department during that time for black people was the Torrance Police Department. The absolute worst at that particular time. It was the Torrance Police Department at that particular time. They talked to black folks like you lived in the South. I lived in Atlanta. I got pulled over when I first moved down there in 1998. And I was living in Marietta, Georgia, and I ventured over to a city which is called Kennesaw.
I'm familiar.
And I'm just trying to, navigate my way through where I live at. This is my community now. I went onto a little road where the street got extremely small. They had a little Mayberry looking gas station. I pulled over there because I wanted to turn around because I was like, hey, I'm going to wait a little bit too far. Had a police officer come over to me. And I was like, oh my goodness. Turned his lights on me. And the first thing he said, boy, what you doing over here? This is 1998. This is not the 60s. This ain't the 80s. This ain't the 70s. This was 1998. That's not that long ago. So as a grown man, I have this white man saying, boy, where do you think you're going? What are you doing over here? I'm in no position to sit up here and get militant with this man. I'm in a place that I really don't know. But to be called boy and the manner in which he did it, it was sickening. And
I'm sorry.
I can still, there's no need to apologize, Gary. And I get it, but I can almost still hear it in my ear of him saying it because I had to eat that. And I just said, yes, sir. I'll go ahead and I'll turn around and I'll go back one direction. But I just drove back home. I didn't even say anything to my wife at the time. I didn't, my son probably was 7 or 8 years old at the time. I didn't say anything to my son at the time, but I ate that. And within me, I was like, man, I don't even want to be in the South no more. But that was my own little story. But yeah, the George Floyd thing is the reason why I have this podcast on right now. And, so that's what it is. So, yeah, we listen, we could do this all day. So listen, there's a couple other questions we want to get to real quick. So there's some media reports. There was also footage of white people vandalizing property after the George Floyd's death. And black people were getting the blame for this. So what are your thoughts on, you have this group of white people who are vandalizing property, during the protests and all that. So what was your thoughts? Because what happens is that we get stereotyped into that.
Absolutely.
Like, they're doing this. Yep. And so what's your thoughts on that, Gary?
So in any demonstration, whether people call it rebellion, uprising, riots, I don't care what you call it at the moment, there are anarchist elements that are going to take advantage of it. And I'm talking the far left and the far right, especially in this case, the Boogaloos. I think Boogaloos is the name, right?
That's it. Yep.
And, there are people that are anarchists that just will never accept any form of government. That's just their MO. And they take advantage of situations where the police are preoccupied.
Right.
And I am just flabbergasted. Although in the age of Trump, I have to tell you, I'm not so surprised. These people, there's nothing. Trump, the most honest thing Trump's ever said, is that he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue.
Yeah,
and
that's it.
That's it. Other than that, he's a big liar. And there's nothing you can believe. But that, got to give the guy, kudos, right?
He was spot on.
And so, the unfortunate thing is I view Trump supporters and trying to convince these people otherwise is a lost cause.
That's right. That's right.
There is maybe a 10% sliver, 15% of the populace that are reasonable, whether they're Republican or Democrat or whatever, and they can, if you show them facts. And so I've tried to not waste my time with some of these people who, one ex-friend of mine, and I'm just going to tell you, he's got a law degree.
Mm-hmm.
He does not believe that white supremacy is a big issue in the United States. No more, I'll paraphrase, no more than Antifa on the left. And I'm like, wow, for an educated guy, you're stupid. I was in the person's wedding. These are things that have come out. We were friends for over 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
I ended the friendship shortly after the George Floyd incident. Right. Because of one thing, and I'll just comment because you made a point of it. I wasn't aware of the University of Texas football coach, but it's this younger white guy. I had no idea who he was. But there was an article right shortly after with George Floyd. And a lot of the coaches were talking to their team and everything. And he came out and there was this article in ESPN. And I read it and it basically said, when I get pulled over for making an illegal U-turn, I'm thinking, damn, how much is this going to cost me? He goes, my players, the black players, are not worried about the cost of a ticket. They're worried about whether they'll come out with their lives. And I remember sending this. We used to have a thread, watching the Colorado Buffaloes play and everything. I sent it and some response as to the article had nothing to do with affirmative action or anything political like that, right? He said, yeah, that's what I want. I want some affirmative action kid marrying my daughter or running one of my companies. This is a very wealthy guy. And I just said, that was it. I lost it. And at that moment, I decided I can no longer be friends with him. And I will add this. I think I may have mentioned to you, he had a little brother, like a big brother program, and it was an African-American kid. He was amazing to the kid. He paid for the family's rent through high school, college, put the kid through college. And so for some of the statements he would make, I couldn't wrap my hands around it. I go, the guy can't possibly be racist. I mean, look what he's done to this kid. And that's when I'm like, no, 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 no. And I just, it was bittersweet, but I've lost a lot of white friends, and that's okay. I've reconnected with so many of my friends back in LA. So I'm sorry for getting off on that tangent, but it's just, it's for white people, it's been a time of reckoning too. And I'm not the only one. There's a lot of people that have cut friendships.
Yeah. Yeah. Gary, one of the things that, I've been saying with the protests is that one of the reasons why I think that there will be a difference this time than in times past is because you have more white people that are engaged now, meaning
Absolutely.
that they're not being silent. And the only way, and I just have to call a spade, the only way that change is going to come, it's going to have to come through you guys, and when I say that it's going to take a joint effort to have white people to stand alongside black folks when it comes down to change. And I say that because so much, when you start cutting into the pockets of these corporations, you start boycotting, and that's the only way that they hear us is through money. That's the only way. It's not, we can march to, we don't have any toes or to the skin on the bottom of the soles our feet come off. The only way change is going to happen is if we have a million more Garys like yourself that have the same type of vigor inside of them to want to say, you know what, enough is enough. So for me, I don't care if the light bulb just came on this morning. It doesn't, that for me, I don't care when your light bulb comes on, but I need your light bulb to come on.
Absolutely.
I need your light bulb to come on so you can understand the reason why our black athletes, why they kneel during the national anthem. There's no one is disrespecting the national anthem, but it's an opportunity to where you can understand why it's happening the way that it is happening. I commend you, Gary, for letting your voice be heard, because there's always a backlash to people that want to stand up for right. And I feel like, you've made the stand to do that. And I so appreciate it. And I think that the group that you have, the Lancer Allies, as I'm part of it now, and I'm very happy to be a part of it. I hope that this will allow myself to be able to have more white connections. I have white friends. My white friends are spectacular. I will go to war, go to bat with them. And I'm always very careful not to stereotype everyone, because everyone is not the same. And I understand that.
Right.
So let me ask you something. So if you could make one statement, and I'm going to just tell the audience now, I'm going to bring Gary back onto the show at another time, because there's just too much that Gary and I need to go over. We're not going to be able to do it just one time, but we're going to do it at a different time. But Gary, to close out, if you could make one statement to racist people to start healing the country, what would it be?
That's an excellent question. And if you'll permit me 5 or 10 seconds to just.
Sure, absolutely.
I would say something that I've said to people, white people that have pushed back on Black Lives Matter or anything. I would say that it's not a zero-sum game. If blacks are given, if they have equity, if they have the same rights, forget whether the law says they should have them. We're talking in reality, right? It doesn't mean we as whites lose. Our economy is strengthened. Our patriotism is increased. It's not a zero-sum game. The synergies, there's not only one piece of pie. If the blacks have the same chances and opportunities that whites do, we'll have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 pies. So just what are you so afraid of?
Yeah. It's, Gary, like I said, man, I told you the other day that, man, I'm going to have a lifelong relationship with you. And, I have friends that when stuff like what happened the other day with Mr. Black in Kenosha, Wisconsin, I have friends where man, I'm so tired of white people, and I get what they're saying. I have to try to reel it in and say, hey, listen, but we have to understand that all white people aren't like that, because there are white people that get stereotyped as well, and they get stereotyped into, all white people are just like these cops. And I know that that's not true,
Right.
And I think that, black people, hey, I've been getting stereotyped all of my life. I know what it feels like. I know what it feels like to go into a department store and I'm getting followed. I know what it likes to go into, out here we call them liquor stores. You go into a liquor store and, uh, the lady or the guy behind the counter comes behind the counter and he's, and I'm in a little convenience store and I'm getting asked, yeah, can I help you? Nobody else is getting asked, that, but they're just want to keep an eye on me. I know what it's like to be in a predominantly white neighborhood and, I'm getting looked at like, what are you doing over here? All of these things that should just be normal. I mean, for a police officer, for me to get pulled over and I'm in Huntington Beach, and for a police officer to ask me, what are you doing here? I feel it's very offensive. It's none of your business what I'm doing
Absolutely.
here.
Yeah.
I have a right to be wherever the heck I want to be. Why are you asking me that? Now, Gary, that's what I want to say. But in order to stay alive, in order not to have a billy club knocked upside of my head and have permanent knots on my head, I have to go and say why I'm here. But, listen, I always tell my son, hey, son, whatever you do, just live to see another day. Live to see another day. So listen, Gary, hey, we're out of time, but, hey, we have a whole lot more. You'll be on the show a lot more because you bring so much to the table. So I want to thank you for coming on today. And, hey, we'll be talking again. There's so much going on in the climate. How can we not talk? So, Gary, why don't you let everybody know what your social media platforms are in case they want to reach out to you?
Perfect. And James, I'd like to reciprocate, by the way. We'll have to have you on the group, Lancer Allies, and have maybe one of your podcasts stream from there.
Absolutely.
So the best way to reach me is go to LancerAllies.com, LancerAllies.com. ALLIES.com. Join us. It's a multiracial group. If you're only into recipes and want to exchange, you know, I joke around with my friend of mine. I'm going to give you my matzo ball soup recipe, and she's giving me like her collard greens and like famous meatloaf. You know,
love it, love it, love it.
Like, so we're doing stuff like that. So please, great. I really right now my Facebook. Whoa, I don't even. If you go to Gary Schwartz, I guess just look up Gary Schwartz. You can email me, Gary.Schwartz, SCHWARTZ611 @gmail. By the way, for those that you don't know, Schwartz means black in German. So
hey, that's right.
There was a reason, right?
That's right. That's
so
right.
You can call me Gary Black, I guess. But
that's right.
James, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you. And then, hey, in closing, what I'm going to do for those that want to get more information about Gary, getting a chance to talk to Gary, phenomenal individual. All his information is going to be on my website in a couple of days, so you guys will be able to get his information from there. So listen, Pick a Side Nation, hey, it's been a pleasure to be able to have Gary Schwartz on my show. And as I always leave with all of my shows, always keep God first place in your lives, and he'll take you places that you never dreamed of. Gary, thank you so much, and I will talk to you on the other side. Take care.
All right, buddy. Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.